So ayahuasca is a plant that translated means vine of the soul. It was traditionally used in shamanic healing ceremonies thousands of years ago, and it comes from Central America, and it's a healing plant. It's now taken as a liquid, and this liquid helps you to open and connect with your pineal gland, which is the gateway for your third eye or your intuition and consciousness. And a bit over a year ago, I sat in an ayahuasca ceremony, and I just want to tell you guys a little bit about my experience, because there's been a lot of people asking me about it, so I want to make sure that I share it and that you guys know as much as possible about it so that you can make an informed decision if it's something that you're considering trying or experiencing, and just so you know what to do and what not to do. So first, what not to do is there have been a lot of pop-up shops that have shown up with these people who might not be the best and most integrity filled shamans. So there's people holding ayahuasca ceremonies in a space that isn't very safe, and it can actually be quite dangerous. So you need to first do your research. Make sure that you either know someone who's participated in a ceremony with the shaman that you're interested in, or that you just know there's good reviews. Listen to your own instincts to see if it feels right. If there's anything that you're feeling a little bit off or scared of, just don't do it. That's my completely honest opinion. Is it's something to be treated in a very sacred way, and you want to make sure that you're doing a ceremony with someone who is respecting the plant and respecting you and the people involved, so that it is treated as the sacred plant that it is. So I went to a location where I had friends who had been, and I'd heard only good things. I'd heard that this location brings in shamans from around the world who are incredibly good, experienced, talented, and that they allow people to go on a very meaningful journey. So I felt safe with the location that I was going in. I also had two friends who were going at the same time, the same evening, so I felt safer knowing that I was also in good company. So that's my disclaimer. It's not something that should ever be done on its own. There are some people who want to use it more as a drug and to get high off of it, and that's really disrespecting the integrity of the plant, and is not the way that it's meant to be experienced. So the most important thing about an ayahuasca ceremony is your intention going into it. So when I first met with the person who owns the space where the ceremony was taking place, he asked me, "What is your intention?" And I believe my intention was to become more connected with myself. So that was my intention going into this ceremony. And what happens is I'll start from the beginning, and I'll just go into detail of everything that happened in my ceremony and the experience that I got out of it. Also know that this plant is a conscious plant that will show you what you most need to see. And so it's not something to compare your experience to someone else, because it's always something that's going to reveal what's inside of you that most needs to be shown to you in that moment. So you could do a ceremony once and have a completely different experience than your next time doing it. So I'm just going to tell you about my first time and the experience that I had. So listen up. So for my ceremony, I was told to dress in white, so I dressed completely in white. I brought a blanket and pillow with me because it is something that goes on throughout the night, and sometimes after the ceremony you just get very tired, so you just kind of pass out right there. So I went in, I had my pillow, and I got into this room, and there was mattresses set up all along the room. So it was a square room. It was beautiful. It was in nature, and there was screens all along so you could see nature around you. And so I sat against the wall, and this is how it works, is that each person has their specific location, and we all sat with our backs to the wall. We had pillows to keep us comfy, and we're told throughout the ceremony to stay in a seated position. You don't want to be lying down while you're experiencing this. It's also meant to be a very individual experience, so you aren't meant to talk with anybody else or interact with them in any way. So we all sit with our backs to the wall, and then there's a shaman, and he introduces himself and explains a little bit about what the ceremony is going to be like, and tells you like he's going to name you one by one. So again, different shaman will have a ceremony a little bit differently. I'm just explaining how mine was, but he would call us up one by one. We would go up, and he would get a sense of how much ayahuasca we should take, what our dose should be. So everyone goes up. I'm the third last, and then my two friends who were with me are twin brothers. So I was the third last, and then I had one twin brother, the other twin brother, and that was it. It was the shaman. So we had everyone around us going first, and so I got to experience and witness everyone going up one by one, taking their sip and going back and sitting down. So it can take sometimes like 20 to 30 minutes for it to kick in. So people would just go back and sit down. And by the time it came around to me, I was called up. I went up and I let him know a little bit about how much I should be taking based on my experience, which was absolutely nothing. So he probably gave me a smaller dose than some other people. And I took my ayahuasca and then thanked him and went back and sat down. And at this point, like, nothing had kicked in because I had just sipped it, but I could hear people across from me, like, starting to grunt and make sounds, and like it sounded like it was a little bit uncomfortable what they were going through, and so I was a little bit nervous for what was going to happen when it kicked in for me, but I just sat there and waited for it to kick in. And then it started kicking in, and like, I can't remember this experience in a linear way. I remember like some visuals of what was happening, but I don't know what happened first or what happened after. I remember feeling at one point, like, so the shaman plays guitar and sings throughout, and he says the songs are meant to help you on your experience with it, and it can help you go deeper into it, or it can just like be a nice sort of tool to help you along the way. And he says you can sing along with it if you want, but try not to overpower other people's voices. So just be mindful of your volume. And he also said you can get up and dance if you want, but again, stay in your space and don't interrupt others on their journey. So the music's playing, and I can hear some people like grunting and like sounding uncomfortable. And then I can start hearing people singing and getting up and dancing, and like I was starting to get visuals of a whole bunch of different things, some things that I didn't enjoy, like some people were coming in, like people who I know who I really didn't want to be seeing in that moment were like showing up in my experience, and I was like, get out of here, like just so. Essentially, if you don't know what ayahuasca is, it is like a form of psychedelic, but it's meant to be taken in a very spiritual and sacred way. So I was seeing things, like you see things. And so all of that was happening, and I was just like, what did I get myself into? I started seeing like kaleidoscopes of people's heads like dancing around and singing, but they were all like making me super dizzy and like spinning around, and I was just like, why did I do this? Like, why am I here? And so anyways, I wasn't feeling awesome. And then as these like heads were spinning and coming like closer and closer, I like felt nauseous, and I was trying to fight it, and I was just feeling like really resistant to what was going on. And then this is one thing I forgot to mention, but we're all given a little bucket beforehand because some people physically purge. So what happens with ayahuasca is that sometimes like these like inner demons will come out, and you physically purge them, which means vomiting. So you'll physically purge them out. So we had this little bucket for our puke, and I know some people watching right now are just like, what did this girl take part in? Anyways, so as these like spinning heads were coming towards me in this kaleidoscope, and they're like singing and like encroaching upon me, and I was like fighting it, then finally I just decided like to vomit. And after I vomited, I felt a lot better. So I realized like, oh, okay, this was just me needing to purge, and I was resisting it. So it was making me feel more sick. So then I continue along my journey, and the woman to my right was like moaning and grunting really loud, and it sounded like she was in lots of pain and like really struggling. And so I noticed that whenever I would listen to her or focus on her, I would start feeling that way, and I would have a really bad experience. And then at one point I looked over to my left, and I saw my two friends are like jamming out, like having the time of their lives, like singing and dancing. And I was like, oh my God, like that's how I want to feel right now. So but then I looked at this woman to my right, and I like would start feeling sick again whenever I'd look at her. And so I was like, I need to get to the place where they're at. But when I would like start to try to go towards that, I'd feel bad for this lady who I'd be like leaving behind. And so I finally decided to like get into their space. And in order to do that, and it's not getting into their space like interrupting their experience, but it's just feeling that energetic vibration that they were on. So in order to do that, I decided like I need to sing. And I was in such a like bad place that to go from feeling like super crappy to then going and like deciding to sing was like a huge shift that I had to take. And so I like slowly and very quietly, it was like my voice was starting to come out, and I started singing, and then it became more and more comfortable the more I would sing. And then I'd hear this lady be like, rah! Like just like not enjoying herself, and then I'd start feeling guilty, but I'd be like, no, like I have to sing and I have to feel good. So then I'd keep like staying strong in my power and singing. And then I started to see these like blue waves coming out of my voice, and then I could see these green waves coming out of other people's voices and out of the guitar. And it was the first time I've ever visually seen sound and music. And I could see it was like so beautiful, all these waves coming in and coming in harmony, and I was singing in harmony with others. So I could hear these like masculine deeper voices, and then my feminine like higher voice, and like other women singing. And I would start these like harmonies, and I'd be like, oh my God, like I sound like an angel, I sound incredible. And it was so beautiful, and I feel like I had a big throat chakra opening experience. And I eventually stood up and started dancing, and I was like, this is incredible. But then part of me still felt like I'm just like doing a psychedelic, like I was just like, what am I doing? Like part of it was still, and I think that comes a little bit from the judgment in society of what psychedelics are, and like drugs are bad, all this stuff, which yeah, like, but this isn't meant to be done like a drug. It is meant to be done like a sacred plant and ceremonial healing experience. And so anyways, I had these different things coming in and out, and even as I'd feel good, there'd still be times where I wouldn't feel as good. I remember at one point I saw, it was like a cardboard box, like you know how when there's like kittens, like people are giving away kittens and they're in these like cardboard boxes. Well, there was that, only it was baby aliens, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm not ready for this. so that like kind of scared me, and different things kind of came and went. And by the time it was done, like you can go back up for another dose. And so when people went for the second one, it was at a time where like I was not having a good time. So I was thinking like, how could anyone be going for more at this point? And then when it came around, there was like a third opportunity. So I went up and took another dose at that point and was doing well. And yeah, like towards the end, it lasts for hours. I think we started at 6 p.m. and it ended at 3 a.m. or something. So by the time we were done, I was still like very confused about what had just happened and what I had just experienced. And the shaman wants to go around and have each person talk about their experience. And so I remember they started going around the circle, and I was thinking like, I don't know what just happened to me, and I do not feel like talking about this, because I feel like all I would say if it got to me was I'd be like, I have no idea. Like, I was just like not in a place where I was ready to talk about what had happened. So anyways, everyone started going around, and then I just fell asleep. And then I woke up and heard the woman to my right speaking about her experience. And as she was talking, she was like, I feel so happy I let out all of this stuff that I had been processing and dealing with, and I was able to overcome all of this stuff and have such a healing experience. And I remember thinking, like, what? Like, she sounded like she was having the worst night of her life, and here she is talking about how proud she is that she like overcame all this stuff. And I was like, what? And then I guess I fell back to sleep, because all I remember after that was my friend to the left of me talking about his experience. And I remember thinking like, oh, thank God I didn't have a turn. And then like my other friends started talking, and then I just fell asleep. So the next thing I remember is like waking up the next morning. Everyone's kind of waking up and starting to pack their stuff up and leave, and like talking about their experience. Some people were sleeping on the land where it was. I was sleeping like right next to it, so that's why I just left and went to the property that I was staying at. But so people were starting to talk about their experience, and I was still feeling like I don't know what just happened. Like, I saw aliens and like all these weird things going on, like people that I did not want in my experience were like showing up, and like weird kaleidoscope faces like, but also the singing and dancing. So it was like there was good and bad, but I was very confused. And so as I overheard my friends talking about their experience, it was really beautiful, and the way that they were talking about it was just this wonderful experience. And so it made me think like, okay, what was the good that came from my experience? And the good that I got was that it was a lesson for me in finding my own balance, my own peace, my own happiness. And the big lesson that I learned from all of this is that I need to be protecting my own energy and finding my own well-being, because if I'm focused on someone who isn't in a good place, all that's doing is draining my energy to be at their level. Whereas whenever I focus on the good and feeling amazing, then I end up acting as a lighthouse for others to see more clearly in their own darkness, just as my friends had been for me. They were feeling so good and shining so bright that I was able to get out of the dark experience that I was having and choose to have an experience more similar to theirs. And in that same way, once I acted as a lighthouse, Bailey, you need to stop making noise. Once I acted as a lighthouse and found my own light, maybe that helped shine light on this other woman who I felt was suffering. And instead of me focusing my attention on her, I focused it on my own well-being to be this light to help others see more clearly. So that's the lesson that I got out of it. And it took me a little while to process and integrate. So the important thing with ayahuasca is whenever you experience it, because it's so focused on your third eye chakra, it's really involving your higher chakras. And so it's really important after taking part in an ayahuasca ceremony to then ground yourself. And so coming out of that ceremony, the other thing that really came out for me was the importance of singing. I knew I need to be singing. I just opened my throat chakra, and how beautiful and incredible the singing and the music experience was in that was a huge lesson for me that I have a lot of power in my voice and I need to be using it and expressing it. So leaving the ceremony, I was singing a lot more and taking that into my everyday life. And I made sure to be walking around barefoot so that I would be grounding. I would lay on the earth to ground. I ate a lot of food. I actually ate like tons of food afterwards. Like, I was starting to gain a little bit of weight, which is very rare for me. Like, I have a pretty high metabolism, but I was eating so much and eating like spicy or warm foods, like lots of soups and just very grounding and rooting foods, root vegetables, and spending lots of time connecting with the earth to be grounded. Because what can happen is you can end up like going off into la la land because you're on such a like high from it. So you do need to make sure that you ground and get yourself back into the space, and the integration and coming back into your life after a ceremony is equally as important as the ceremony itself. So that was my experience. I'm not sure if I left anything out, but feel free to ask any questions if you guys are wondering about anything. And I hope this helps if any of you are wondering. My other thing is I'm not going to say where I did it, because the thing with ayahuasca is it's almost like the plant calls you when it's time for you to do it. So if it's coming into your consciousness and you're really curious about it, then it's going to just present itself to you. So for me, it had been a few months where I'd been learning a bit about ayahuasca, hearing about other people's experiences, and then I got to this place where I didn't even know there were ayahuasca ceremonies nearby, and I was just talking about it and someone said something about it. My first experience with ayahuasca.